Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. Today we're going to be talking about hobbies. So, what's my favorite hobby? Number one hobby? It's collecting everything that has engines in it or on it, and motors too. So anyway, the theme for today is going to be collecting chainsaws. And the reason we collect them is because we like to. Number two is that we use them all the time. It's the most used power equipment we use on the homestead here. So anyway, we'll talk about the different saws and talk about periphery things that the company's made, so you can see all the different things that they made and did and collect. So you can have saws and all these other products, memorabilia, history, paraphernalia, hats and stuff like that. So anyway, let's get on. So we're going to start out with our smallest one here. This is made by the Ohlson and Rice company in California. They made these little bitty saws from the mid-60s until about 1973. They're based on a model airplane motor, which is kind of unusual. But anyway, it's 1.34 cubic inches or 21.95 cc's. And the thing that they made also, this is the same engine that's in the saw here. This is a military version. They made a little miniature generator, which I don't have on it, but they used it in the military for running radios out in the woods and whatnot and stuff like that. And they rated these 3/4 or 5/8 or 1 horsepower, depending on different things. And the thing that happened with them was that they tried all kinds of different things, trying to branch out. They made generators, like I say, and they made a saw, like a hand saw for cutting wood, gas powered instead of electric motor on it. Had an outboard, had a drill. It's all kinds of little interesting weird stuff. But the thing that, if you want to look at the engine here closely, right here and right here has these mounting lugs, and that's because it was designed originally for a model airplane. I'll show you some Ohlson and Rice motors here. Okay, well, here's a couple of Ohlson and Rice airplane motors. You can see that they have the mounting lugs on the side, just like the little motors and the chainsaw does. Now, these are fairly early ones. These were made from late 30s up through the early 50s, and this is what's called an ignition motor. It has a little ignition timer right here, has a set of contact points in it, and then there would be a coil that sit in the fuselage of the plane or boat, and then it had a little miniature spark plug in here. And this is the biggest one they made. It's a Model 60 side port, so that means it's an early one. There's the mixture screw and the exhaust port, but we had one of these mounted on a bicycle when we were kids, and had an 18-inch prop on it. It would actually pull us on level ground, but being kids, we didn't think about it too much. These have a mixture of gasoline, castor bean oil, and other additives, and the prop wash, or the wind blowing back from the prop, went right in our faces. We thought it was a great deal of fun. Be right back. Well, our next unlikely company to make chainsaws is the L.M. Cox Company. This is a model 140-1. It's made in 1966 only. It's 22.9 cc's. And the thing that they made, we're most famous for, all airplane motors. These were the largest selling model airplane engines, and they were also the best. And they had all kinds of different things. Had all dune buggies, and there's a chaparral race car. See the motor here, it's an 049. Has a little fan on it to cool it. Has a gear drive to the rear wheels. These are what's called a TD series, a front rotary valve with an intake on the front, and these are high performance engines. This is an 049 version of it here. And another thing that they built. Little ready-to-fly model airplanes. They're all plastic. Most of them had an 049 in them, some had an 020, and even a few had an 010. You have a little spring here you can hook on the prop and wind it backwards and let it just spin to start it. But this used to be a real popular hobby, and has control lines usually about 30 to 40 feet. We've got bugs bugging me here. And a handle, and you would control, you could do stunts and different things with them. And today there's hardly anybody who does control line stuff. I'm one of the few that still likes to do it on occasion. We might do a video on it at some time. But anyway, it's just interesting how different companies tried different ways of trying to make money and failed a lot of times. So anyway, we'll keep talking about chainsaws. And like I say, we started out with the smallest and be working our way up. Well, the next saw and displacement up is our 40V John Deere. It's actually only 35 cc. The big fibbers at John Deere when you think you're getting a 40 cc saw. But John Deere didn't actually make these saws. They had 3 different companies that I know of. The early saws were Remington, from Remington Firearms Company. This one is Japanese Kiritz, or Echo as it's called today. The last saws they sold were EFCO from Italy. And so these companies branch out. I have other John Deere junk. I've got a couple of John Deere bicycles and a John Deere lawnmower. And I bet I know what you're thinking. I wonder if he has a John Deere tractor. Well, you'll just have to keep watching our videos to find out, won't you? So we'll move on to the next one. Well, our next saw here, up in displacement, this is a Dynamark. It's a private label saw. It took me a while to figure out who made it, but it's a Lightning model from Lombard called a Lightning Super. It's 39 cc's. And Lombard made a lot of different saws. They also made some other interesting stuff, which I'll talk about in later videos. But anyway, that's a nice thing about collecting chainsaws, vintage chainsaws for me. But not only can you collect them, you can study the history on them and think about the corporate history and all the different things, the whole aspects, and work on them and make them run again. And so anyway, it's a great hobby for us because we actually use them. We don't have modern saws. On to the next. Okay, well, the next saw displacement up is Homelite Super EZ automatic oiling, and it's 40.9 cc. These are a real popular little saw. These are really good saws too. They have this one especially has unusual features because it has a full wrap handlebar and it has a big guard on the muffler. I believe they were made for the Pacific Northwest. The other thing it has is a compression release. Mr. C first gave it to me, I pulled it through and compression was low on it. And I saw this, figured out what it was, and the valve was actually stuck, so it has really good compression now and runs great. So anyway, we'll move on to the next. Well, here we have a Stihl 025. It's a 2000 model year. This is one of the newest saws I have. It was donated by Mr. Toby. And it's a 44.3 cc. Of course, Stihl makes all kinds of power equipment, trimmers, and all kinds of different things. And so this is a really nice, handy, light little saw. And we have in a video coming up here pretty soon. We're out working on a big tree, and so we use this for branching and some other work on it. But anyway, like I say, when you collect a variety of saws, both new and old, you have a wide variety to choose from. You have a saw for every reason. Well, all the saws we showed you so far are what I consider small saws. So now we're going to move into the mid-size saws. So we've got our Homelite XL12. It's 54 cc. And this is the most copied chainsaw ever made. Almost every other manufacturer copied this saw because when this came out in 1964, made everything else pretty much obsolete. So anyway, I made these from 1964 to 1988. Well, if you're a Homelite collector, a lot of diverse bunch of stuff they made, so you don't have to just collect chainsaws. They made tampers and generators is what they started with, and just power units, pumps. So here's a XL12 water pump. It's the same power head as this saw here. Some of the early ones, the fuel tank was like on the saw, built into the case. It's plugged off here and has an external tank. But like I say, there are a lot of different things. We had an old Homelite generator, an old two-stroke one, made in the 60s, and we used it for years and years and years before the generator part of it finally failed. So there again, there's all this diverse stuff you can collect that's Homelite, so not just saws. So we'll be right back. Well, here's another mid-size saw, our McCulloch Timber Bear. You can see the logo right there. It's got a bear. It says Timber Bear. So this is also a 54cc saw, just like the XL12 Homelite. And these are some of the very last saws that McCulloch made. This was built in a Mexican plant. When they were on their way downhill, they invested a bunch of money and built a brand new plant in Mexico. And they only produced saws there for maybe a couple of months. And they owed creditors for bearings and seals and a bunch of other stuff. And they all cut them off, and that was the end of McCulloch. So these seem to survive pretty good. A lot of them around still. In fact, I have one of them that's brand new in the case. But run a 24-inch bar, and these are pretty powerful. So we'll get another saw for you. Okay, well, this is a McCulloch ProMac 610. It's a Montgomery Ward's version of it. The color's different. And I usually run a 20 or a 24-inch bar on it. Got a 20 on it now, but these are 60cc. This is the most common saw I use. I get a small herd of them. And it's a saw that I started with when I started heating with wood in 1980. My original saw is still in operation and still working its way through the wood. So anyway, that's another mid-size saw. We got one more to come in the mid-size range. Okay, well, this is the last of the mid-size saws we're going to show today. This is our Lombard Lightening, and this is 68.8cc. And there again, it looks exactly like a Homelite XL12. And the reason for that is when Lombard decided to make saws with their own engines. They used to use Power Products engines in their earlier saws. They hired an ex-engineer from Homelite, and it's almost 100% identical. There's even a few parts that'll fit on them, but not too much. They changed it just enough so they wouldn't be in any lawsuits. So anyway, we'll move on to our medium-large saws. Okay, well, we're going to start with a medium-large saws. This is a real powerful saw that I use quite a bit, my ProMac 700, 70.5cc. And this basic chassis started out as a Model 110 back in the mid-60s. It's all metal. And I used for the 1010, ProMac 555, a whole bunch of different models. The interesting thing is the basic power head is the same for all of these saws, and also the 600 series saws like the 610 and stuff. The cranks and the bearings and seals and stuff are all the same. Same basic power head. Some of them had the exhaust come out the side of the cylinder, and some of them come out the bottom of the cylinder. But anyway, we'll grab another one here. Okay, our next saw, I'm going from the what I call the modern era, like the ProMac 700, to the vintage era. This is a 1961 model, Homelite 500, at 77.6cc. In our last video we talked about this a bit. This is a homeowner grade saw because it's got the steel tank and the Chizo caps and stuff instead of like a cast tank on the better saw. But anyway, this basic engine was used in so many of their different products, the pumps, generators, and everything else. Very reliable. Last you forever if you take good care of them. Okay, we'll move on to the next. Well, our next saw, the last one in this series, this is a Root Whiz. They were made in Kansas of all weird places. They were basically obsolete when they were new. Made in the mid-60s and the early 70s with this type of layout. Uses a Power Products AH47 engine, 4.7 cubic inch or 77 cc. This one's in really nice shape. Got a roller nose there. The thing that's kind of unusual though is the air cleaner and the carburetor are mounted on the bottom of the crankcase, and where all the sawdust and stuff comes up. And the more deluxe model, this cover actually covered it so that it wouldn't have to clean the air cleaner so often. It's big and heavy, and actually quite rare. This one happens to be in really nice shape. Shrouds die cast aluminum. The exhaust system just a straight stack. Now, they did other things besides saws too. They made farm implements and stuff for small gardens and things like that. So anyway, just interesting how all these companies tried lots of different things to stay in business. Okay, well, this will be the start of the large saws that we operate and collect. This one was in our last video. It's a Homelite C-7, 80.5 cc. This is your old school saw, the big giant engine and big heavy castings and stuff. It's got a 17-inch bar with a 404 chain on it. So if you want to see this in operation, go back and watch our last video. Okay, our next large saw here is our Pioneer P50. It stands for 5 cubic inch, 82 cc. This runs a 27-inch bar. This is a big, powerful saw, 1974. I like using this one. Wood up to about 3 feet or a little bigger. Cuts right through it. Runs about 8,500 in the wood. So anyway, another company that made other stuff, but not a lot of different things. Mostly just chainsaws. So anyway, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, our next large saw is our Stihl 051. It's 89 cc, 36-inch bar or roller nose. This thing, I'm in the process of cutting up a 145-foot long tree with it. It'll be on some upcoming videos. And I don't get to use it much because most of the trees we have are not that big in diameter either. It's big diameter. So anyway, we'll be showing a video over here pretty soon. But it's got dual spikes. Yeah. I just put a new decompression valve in to start it. These are real bare to start without it. And anyway, so gonna move on to our extra large saws. Okay, well, our next extra large saw here is our McCulloch ProMac 1000 of 100 cc. It was made in 1976. McCulloch didn't actually make it. It's a Swedish partner, P100 in disguise, but still a pretty rare saw. And this one took a lot of work, but it's in really nice shape. But anyway, it's got an extra big muffler on it, and got a 32-inch bar. Nice, powerful saw. The thing that's interesting though is that this thing pulls through, it about yanks your arm off. And the partner version of it had a decompression valve, and this one does not. So I guess they figured if you're tough enough to start a big McCulloch, be a He-Man, here it is, instead of being like a P100 and be a weenie. Well, our next extra large saw is our McCulloch Model 795. This is the big block. That was saws that had a big displacement, and the largest one was the SP-125, the most wanted saw in all of vintage collecting. This one It was a, you know, professional grade saw, and they had things that they made with the motor. You know, the other thing that McCulloch was real famous for is go-kart motors, and this one was used in making the kart motors. And you know, like I say, McCulloch was the top dog in the kart motors for a long time before more modern designs came in from Europe, because these were all based on chainsaw power heads. Even though they were highly modified, they still were not designed from the ground up as a hot rod kart engine. So this one has it's all metal, a big spike on it and whatnot. So these were what the pros used almost exclusively in the Northwest, were these big McCullochs, because they were the toughest saws out there. They're also one of the toughest starting. And one of the other things you can collect is paraphernalia that goes with the saws. Move on to the next. Okay, well, this will be the last saw we're going to show today in our extra large capacity. It's a Stihl 075. It's 111 cc. Got a 60-inch bar and chain on it. Double spikes. It's a real lightweight, only 46.5 pounds. So this saw, next video or two, depending on how things work out, I'll be using this on the last part of that big tree that we're cutting up for Mr. C, that 145-foot long tree. So you get to see the 075 and the 051 and a couple of other Stihls running. So anyway, that'll be it for our exciting video today. So remember, vintage is best. We'll see you soon.